What's up, friends? Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Selena. I'm an economist and a content creator in the Washington, D.C. area. I create a bunch of lifestyle, productivity, and wellness journey vlogs. So if you're into that sort of thing, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. With all of that said, you've seen the title to today's video. It's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to share with you all a bit more of my educational and career background. As you all know, I'm currently an economist, and I'm also 25 years old, but there is definitely a backstory. I know you all asked me questions about my career and how I got to where I am and all of those things. So I asked you all on my Instagram, which if you're not following me on my Instagram, you definitely should. That's where I get all of my Q&As from all of you. So I'm gonna start by giving a little background. It's kind of hard to know like where to start, but I'm gonna do my best. So my first job, it really depends what you all consider like a job. I mean, I was like mowing lawns and like making flyers to walk dogs and to pet sit when I was like 11 years old. As soon as I knew how to use a printer, I was already trying to start my own business. I feel like I've naturally been an entrepreneur since day one, like before entrepreneurship was even as big as it is. So there's that. But my actual like real first grown-up job was working at a restaurant at age, I think I was 15 when I started, or I had just turned 16 when I started that job. I worked there for almost a year, like through my senior year, I believe. I worked at a restaurant, and then from there I took on other server positions, and that's actually the first job that I got at college, to work in the dining hall at my university. Oh my gosh, and I felt so blessed that I was able to get a job right before I started my actual first year of college, because I was so afraid of how I was gonna pay for college because my parents could not help me. I mean, they did their best, so they definitely did help me actually with like part of my rent my first year to kind of just like get me started. And to give further context, my first year my rent was around $500 and my parents were helping me to pay around $200. But like in terms of tuition, like they couldn't help me with anything else. So I pretty much just took whatever jobs that I could from age 15 until I finally was able to get like a real job. I felt like I was growing career-wise. I always enjoyed my server jobs to an extent. I feel like even now, those were the jobs where I built the most character, and I made so many friendships and relationships at work. Working as a server, as a waitress, those were the jobs that I feel like really taught me so much invaluable information about relationships and customer service and things that you truly cannot learn in school. So I very much value those jobs, and I wanted to incorporate that into my career journey. So I worked as a server and did that for a couple of years. By the way, I'm not gonna go into every single job because I've had a ton of jobs. Like I have not had any time off since I was 15. And so I would work summers and I would work odd jobs here and there, but I have not been unemployed for more than like 2 weeks in the past decade pretty much of my life. So that would be a lot of jobs. So I'm just gonna kind of go through the highlights. So throughout my time in college, I always had at least 2 jobs. So I was a server at first, and then almost immediately I got another job as like a student ambassador on campus for this program on our campus. So as a student ambassador, I would go and perform outreach at other schools, universities, with my university, and speak about my experience as a first generation Latina attending university, and kind of inspiring parents and students to prepare for university and giving them the ins and outs of financial aid and FAFSA and all of that. That was one of my favorite jobs to this day, and I also have had the best mentor. He was my supervisor but also my friend, and well, he became my friend, and I loved that job. So that job also really connected me to my roots. I was a bilingual student ambassador, so I would would speak to parents and students in both English and Spanish. So oftentimes I had to present in Spanish and give my experience and all of that in Spanish because we were catering to marginalized communities, which were oftentimes, you know, Latino communities, and they tend to be underserved. That was one of the most impactful jobs that I've had to this day. So I worked that job pretty much throughout my entire time at university. And then, hold on, I feel like I need a little bit of coffee. Ooh, black coffee just hits different. So keep in mind that this job as a student ambassador, I worked my entire time in college. So this was one of the jobs that I kept pretty much for the 3.5 years that I was in college. Okay, so these other jobs that I tell you about, I worked simultaneously while I also worked that job. There was a couple of summers where I did go home, but most of the summers I did tend to just stay at my university because I lived in an apartment from day one. I never lived in the dorms, but actually I did live in the dorms later, but we'll get into that once it comes to that time. But some summers I would work, like in Portland, I got a job working in corporate actually for kinder care. And that was an interesting job, but again, like I said, I would take whatever job I could, and it was actually really well paying. Like I remember I was, I think, a junior in college or a sophomore in college, and I was making like $20 an hour that summer just because, you know, I had 2 years of college experience and I had tons of customer service experience from all of the jobs that I had done thus far. So I really thank God for all of the opportunities that I had professionally, even those like customer service jobs. I worked as a server at a residential community for senior living, and I really enjoyed that job, and that experience really helped me understand like ageism and just different people from different backgrounds and demographics. So that helped me get the job at that corporate job for that summer, working in pretty much customer service and all of that. I also at one point worked at Planet Fitness for a summer. That was fun. Won't get too much into that. It was an okay job. Then going back to school, I would always continue on with the student ambassador job. I got very involved in university organizations. I was internal director of a student organization that was focused on women empowerment, specifically women of color, and then even more specifically Latinas, but it was open and inclusive to any woman of color. It was really nice. It was diverse. Another year, I was a finance director. There was another student organization that I was also simultaneously the finance director for while I was the internal director for the other organization, while also working my other job. And at this time, I had also recently gotten a full-time job as an RA while I was in college. So mind you, I was an RA, like a resident assistant. I lived in the dorm and I had, you know, 70 residents with my co-RA. We both kind of were in charge of this one building. So I had that job. I worked at both the student organizations, which we would meet twice a week, and you know, there was also planning and organizing. We had several events that we had to plan. We had to fundraise. And when I say we, I mean me and the other board directors, as well as obviously the members that were involved in those groups. And mind you, at the same time, while doing all of this work on campus, I was still a full-time student. You know, I was still trying to get my bachelor's of science in economics and in international studies. I wanted to dual major, and then I also was working on a minor in business. So I was a very busy student. And then fast forward to, I think, the summer between my junior and senior year, I got my first like big internship. This is where I was kind of introduced into the world of internships. Again, I'm a first generation student. I'm a daughter of immigrants. Like my mom is from Mexico. She was not born here. Neither of my parents have any college experience or education. And so I guess I really truly had no idea. Like everything at university was very much unexpected for me and new. And so I guess that's why I was so involved on campus, because I just wanted to really take it all in and do the work to really help marginalized communities on campus as much as I could. So then that led to me becoming a part of student government. I was voted in, because you have to be voted in to be a part of student government. So I became a student senator, and we were in charge of essentially the allocation of our yearly budget, which for my university is a little bit bougie when it it comes to our student government, because I think we were in charge of about $1.7 million because our annual budget was just insane. There was student government and then there was executive, so there was like different levels. The board that I was on, we would vote weekly on where we would allocate extra funds that were left over from the actual like budget and line items. So I got a lot of experience there with student government and just kind of seeing how government worked. The summer between my junior and senior year was when I had my first internship in Washington, D.C. I interned at an economic research agency, and that was kind of the first time that I dipped my toes into any type of government agency. I didn't know anything about government jobs at all at this point. I didn't know anything about life in DC. Everything was completely new to me. I was the first in my family to ever just like leave the state for so much time for any reason. And you know, I was the first in my family to ever get an internship or work for the federal government, even as an intern. And oh my gosh, again, I thank God so much because it was such a blessing to have the opportunity to come to DC. They paid for my flight. It was a paid internship because if it wasn't paid, I wasn't privileged enough to afford to do any type of internships or studying abroad if it wasn't paid for, you know, like I just wouldn't have been able to afford it. So the internship program that I did was HACU, which is the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And obviously by looking at the name, it's to serve underserved communities in the Latino community, but the application is actually open to anyone. Like, they're not exclusively for Latinos. It was created to bring more opportunities to Latinos, which thank God, because without that program, I don't think I would be where I am right now, period, point blank. Like, there'd be no way. I never would have had the experience in the federal government. So I'm forever thankful for that opportunity. So after the internship, I went back to school, finished my year as an RA, as a senator, as a director on the student organizations. And then during my senior year, I think the last 2 months, I ended up quitting my job as an RA because this was my second year as an RA. So now my senior year, I wasn't only an RA, I was like a team leader RA. So now I was in charge of the RAs instead of just being an RA. And so I felt a lot of pressure with that job and responsibility in addition to my student government job and my student organization leadership roles, and just wanting to graduate on time and wanting to apply to jobs. So the last 2 months I ended up quitting early, but my director totally encouraged me and it was like all cool. It wasn't anything bad. But in that time is when I actually had another opportunity pop up because one of my friends from student government had gotten this job at this law firm close to our university. And he put in a good word for me because he knew that I was interested in becoming a lawyer and that I would love the experience. So I ended up getting a job at a law firm as a legal assistant, a bilingual legal assistant at an immigration law firm. It was criminal defense and immigration. So I worked there for like, I think it was around 8 months. Got a lot of experience there. It was definitely an interesting position. It was definitely one of the reasons that I became a little bit more anxious about becoming a lawyer, because I got to see the ins and outs of having your own small law firm and kind of like the stresses that came with it. And one of the things that was really heartbreaking for me to see working at a law firm, an immigration law firm, was just it's just so heartbreaking because we would provide immigration work to anyone, not just, you know, Latinos, not just Mexicans or Guatemalans or, you know, people who speak Spanish. We had Australians come in, like people from other countries come in, and we would also help them with their paperwork. One thing that I noticed was just the discrepancies in our legal system. For example, like the paperwork would just get filed and completed and approved so much quicker for people from certain countries that are not from South America or Latin America, and they wouldn't have the same problems. Yeah, it was just heartbreaking. And I'm a daughter of immigrants, so it just hits home. And so seeing a lot of just the discrepancies, it was really hard. And so it kind of made me feel like less inclined to become a lawyer, because I knew, like, I know myself, I have so much empathy for other people, especially when they're near me physically. And I just felt like I'd be crying every day. And I know as a lawyer, like, you have to be strong for, you know, for your clients. And I just didn't know if that was the kind of life that I saw for myself, because I've always seen myself as like someone seeking justice for marginalized communities that have not historically gotten justice. And I still think that that is a huge important mission for me. But anyway, that job was just very eye-opening to me and kind of like derailed me from going straight to law school, which is why I'm still not in law school and I'm still trying to figure that out. So at this point, I was only a few months away from graduating. I actually did not graduate in the spring. I took more classes because, again, I was doing a double major and then also a minor in business. So I finished off my classes in the summer of 2018, and during the summer of 2018, I was still working at that law firm. And, you know, the lawyer there actually wanted me to work there for a couple of years and then go to law school and then be hired as a lawyer. Like, she had a whole plan. But unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't super inspired to go straight to law school. So I had applied once again to the internship that I did, the Haku internship. And the way that internship works is that they have connections with like tons of federal agencies. It's not like you get placed at the same agency every single time, and it's not like you get chosen and accepted every time just because you've gotten it once. You definitely have to like reapply, write new essays and all of that. And so I did that. So this was actually the second time that I would be attending the internship. So I got accepted. So after I finished my last classes in summer of 2018, I went back to Washington, D.C. I quit my job as a legal assistant. Wow, this is getting really long, but I'm going through the entire journey because a lot of your questions on the Q&A were like, what jobs have you had? What's your experience? How'd you get to where you are? What was your major? And all of this is gonna be answered in this video. So I went back to Washington, D.C. This time I got an internship at the Library of Congress. I was a research assistant. Amazing people. I got to work with a librarian, and she has become one of my good friends. I love her so much. She's amazing. And she's the one who's really just encouraged me to stay in the federal government and to kind of keep pursuing the federal government. She's had like 30+ years working for the federal government, so she has a lot of knowledge and wisdom that she's provided and continues to provide. So I had a really great experience there. While I was there, I got to write, it was like a research paper and annotated bibliography that was supposed to be published for researchers, and my topic was the economic effects of Hurricane Maria on Puerto Rico, because at the time, you know, that whole devastating natural disaster had just occurred, and there was just such a frustrating response from the US government at the time. Response efforts in Puerto Rico were just lacking in comparison to response efforts in Louisiana or Texas. It was just a little bit worrisome, and so I wanted to write about it and kind of bring into context how the economy is actually greatly affected by Puerto Rico. I love the experience though. I got to write a paper and I learned a lot there and made some good connections, and that was my second time interning. And then, oh my gosh, y'all, when I tell y'all, I applied to at least 70 jobs during that internship, because I had, at that point, I was graduated. Like, I was ready to get into the workforce. I wanted to stay in DC. I wanted to start a career here. Oh my gosh, I wanted a good job here so bad. Out of those 70 applications, I only got like a handful of interviews. I applied to think tanks, nonprofits here, the federal government, DC government. I applied to anything and everything that fit what I was looking for, which was like experience in economics, research assistant, or to work in some sort of legal assistant job. Like, I was looking for any and all of that, or to just work for a nonprofit that worked with the legal system and things like that. But I did not get a job, so I ended up having to fly back to Oregon at the end of my internship, and I was pretty devastated, but I did not lose hope. I kept applying, and when I tell y'all that I have not been unemployed for more than 2 weeks, I was not lying. Like, as soon as I got home, because I didn't have a job lined up, I started driving Lyft because I would not work. So I was like, I'm not exaggerating. I have not had like a break since I was 15. So as soon as I got home, I drove for Lyft for a couple of weeks until I got another job, which it was a corporate job in Oregon. I worked for Columbia Sportswear Company. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're huge in Oregon and the West Coast, but they're not huge over here. I don't really see their stuff everywhere. Anyway, I ended up working in HR for like 4 months there. I got it through a temp agency and didn't love it. Was not the most inclusive environment. I was the only Latina, the only brown person. There was one Asian woman, but she, let's just say, was not an ally to me. Yeah. So it was just not the best time. I felt very much, I don't know what the word is, ostracized, isolated. For example, so my supervisor at the time was a white woman, and my experience with supervisors is usually really well. And I only have 2 supervisors that come to mind that have ever made me feel like less human, and it has always been white women. So I'm just gonna leave that there. We can have more discussion in the comments if you would like, but that's just the cold hard truth. That's my experience. So this woman, my supervisor, mind you, this was my first job after college, not an internship, but job. And I was just so happy to be there. And I loved Colombia. Like, it's one of my favorite places to shop growing up. And one time she came in through the door and I said, good morning. And well, not once, I've tried a couple of times. And she just walked right past me and like didn't acknowledge me. And this just went on for the entire time I was there. I was never acknowledged, really never talked to by my name. I was never invited to anything. There's just no other way to say it. I was just excluded from everything. And the rest of my team, you know, they were all friends, not people of color besides the one Asian woman. And they were all pretty close to my age. So that's why I didn't understand like why people didn't want to hang out. And so then later on, another girl was hired. She was white too, but she was like Russian American. And so I don't know, she was just different from them. Like, she was immediately nice to me, like a good person, and we became friends, and I appreciate her to this day because I don't think I could have survived that very toxic environment if it wasn't for her. So thank you if you're watching this. So that was that, but being at that job encouraged me and pushed me so much to just look for a new job. Like, I was never one to just quit a job because I wasn't happy, and I could have, because at that time I was in Oregon and I was living with my parents for those 3 to 4 months. So I could have done that, but it's not in me to quit a job and do nothing. It's just not in me. I felt like my mom sacrificed so much for me to come to the US and to provide the best life possible for me, that I've always felt like I can't just not work. Like, I can't not do my best to pay it forward. So I pushed through that job until I got a new opportunity. I got a job relatively quickly. I had the interview and I was hired that day. Like, they called me that day, offered me a job. I asked for a higher wage than they had offered me, and they met me, and they actually paid me that amount, which was pretty nice. It was for a really amazing nonprofit. Love them, love the place. I worked there for like 3 to 4 months as well, but I don't know, I guess I just wasn't happy because I always felt like I wanted to do more. I felt like I wanted to work for the federal government. I had high ambitions after college and during college. That's what it was. Because looking back now, if I had that job now, I feel like I would be very content, but I just wanted more at the time. So I was still applying to jobs in the federal government and internships and fellowships and all of that. After leaving Columbia, working at the nonprofit for 3 months, I was offered a fellowship position at the Library of Congress in contracts and grants, and I accepted it, and I moved to DC. So that's kind of where the beginning of my journey and being in DC permanently began. So that was, I think, May or June of 2019 is when I moved here for that fellowship. And it's a fellowship, but really I was hired at the library. I worked there, the people were amazing, the job was very complex, but I ended up picking it up, like my role and everything, but I just wasn't passionate about it. So I continued to look for other opportunities. I always just wanted to at least get one job where I could get experience in what I actually studied, which is economics. So I applied like on a whim. When I tell you it was on a whim, it was definitely last minute. Like, I just one day looked at USA Jobs and I saw that this agency was hiring an economist, and the application, like the deadline was for 5 p.m. that day when I looked at it, and it was noon when I looked at it. So I had to like scramble to pull up my resume and make a reference list and cover letter and all of that, and also respond to all of the KSAs, which for the federal government are knowledge, skills, and abilities. So in addition to all of the other documents that you have to provide, they also often have you respond to questions, and you have to very thoroughly explain your knowledge, skills, and abilities in the different job requirements that are listed. And if you, for whatever reason, let's say you're the most qualified candidate, but you just don't take the time to write everything out thoroughly, you will not get chosen. Like, there's a very specific way to apply to the federal government because they look for keywords. So just know that. And I learned all of this from my internships, from all the workshops and stuff. So I kind of had already had experience with applying to jobs. I had already had a couple of other interviews for the federal government while I was working at the Library of Congress, but none of those went through. So again, this job that I was applying for was on a whim, but I ended up getting that job. I actually got 2 offers from the same agency. I ended up picking the division that I'm working in now. That's how I became an economist. Like, everyone's always asking me how I got to where I am, and it's just, I couldn't give you like a 1-word answer or even like a short form answer, because I don't think that that would be fair, because I know that a lot of you who watch my videos, like, you want to become an economist or pursue economics, or you just want to actually know what the heck does an economist do. And it would not be fair to you if I just said, yeah, I just went to college and I graduated and I did a couple internships and then I got the job. Like, a lot of backstory I think went into it. And actually, one of the reasons that my supervisor said he hired me was all of the student government work that I did at my university, because not only was I like on the board and I was a senator, but I improved the systems in the student organization that was for women of color. Like, when I joined their group, there was only like 3 or 4 girls that would show up regularly. Things were pretty disorganized, and I was so passionate about helping and improving this organization. I just saw a vision for what it could be, and I was just like, we need to fix it. And I jumped in there, I was voted in, and I helped that group grow from 4 women to eventually like 30, 40 plus women that would come to our weekly meetings. Women and allies, because it was very inclusive. It's not like we would only accept women or women of color. And now it's to the point where I pretty much started something and helped grow something, built a new system, got it more organized. And it's not to say it was all me. Of course, the board and everyone who was in the group jumped in and helped, and they all did their part. But I guess I also want to acknowledge that I did take the initiative to get that all started and to organize it. And so that was on my resume, and he really loved that. Like, he really loved that I did that. This is all to say that it doesn't matter how technical the job is that you're applying for. You need to be honest about who you are, and what you think might not be relevant experience for the job you're applying to could be the exact reason that you get hired. It could be the #1 reason that you stand out from all the other applicants. And one thing that I will say is that by staying true to myself, I ended up where I am, and I think I'm where I'm supposed to be at this point in my life. Also, if you're a woman of color, I know that it feels like sometimes the world is up against you, and sometimes it really is. Sometimes it feels like you have to just like work 10 times harder than certain other people that are around you, and sometimes we just really do, because that's just what it takes for us to be successful, unfortunately, because we don't have the same certain privileges that are given to other people. And so I really do feel like the journey has been so long to get to where I am right now. I just realized I didn't finish talking about women of color in the workplace. But if you are a woman of color in the workplace, and you've applied to 50 jobs, 60 jobs, 100 jobs, and nobody will take you or give you the time of day, I am with you. Even if you're not a woman of color, I still am with you. It's hard. Life post-grad is hard, but I'm specifically reaching out to my women of color, because we know that there are certain hardships that some of our friends just will never understand. It's just the way the world works. But if there really are friends, and if there really are allies, they will do the work to understand. But just know that I understand, and I'm sending you love, and I am here for empowering other women and to bring up women of color. So if you have any questions about anything, applications and things like that, more of the technical logistics of how I got to where I am and applying for jobs, make sure to leave them down below. I would love to answer them all in the comments section, or maybe compile all of the questions and answer them all in a future video. But I just wanted to pop in here real quick and say that. I really wanted to just share my career journey with you all, because I have been promising it for such a very, very long time. So I hope that this video cleared up some things and gave you a little bit more more insight about who I am and my heart behind my career, and just like my experience, not only as an economist, but as a woman of color and as a Latina, as a first generation college graduate, as a first generation professional. I think sometimes it can just be very impactful and powerful to just share our own stories and our own truths. So I hope that you got something out of this video. If you did, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and please make sure to comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts, or if you have any other questions that I didn't answer today, please be sure to leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. What are you doing? I would love to have you as part of the family. With all that said, I will see you all in the next video.